Hi, everyone. Welcome to another fantastic hyprfire lunch and learn. Hopefully you've got a lunch, so let's get to learning. We're talking about threat hunting today, and this is a really sort of base level general idea of threat hunting. We're sort of aiming this one at someone who, is in cybersecurity, in blue team sort of stuff, and may want to get into a bit more of threat hunting, or may actually want to know what this even really means, because in blue team we seem to have a bit of a fuzzy idea of what the different elements and the different tasks inside the blue team look like. So we're just going to go through and talk about broadly what we do, and I'm also going to talk about some of the sort of open source or first steps approaches you can get onto if you're looking to start just practicing, because with threat hunting, as with a lot of cybersecurity specialties, what you want to do is you want to get practicing even if you don't have a proper certification yet. You just want to get some experience in there, because the more experience you'll have, the better you'll be at it. So what is threat hunting? Well, threat hunting is generally what I would have considered to be what you actually do in blue teams. I didn't go into blue team cybersecurity with the idea of, I want to sit in front of a desk in front of a SIEM or a SOC for 8 hours a day, clicking off tickets, right? Responding to what the machine spits out. I didn't really think that's what we did. I would have sort of more a romantic view of the idea of, hey, let's go and fight hackers. Let's go and fight these bad guys who are breaking into our systems and stealing stuff. And that was a little bit more advanced than just listening to the security tools and doing whatever they say. So realistically, it's that sort of extension to SIEM usage, where we're not just going, hey, SIEM said, activity on the firewall's been blocked. Let's go investigate where that came from if we need to do anything for it. SIEM has come back and said, there's a virus on a machine, let's go deal with that. What we're talking about is investigating things that are beyond just an alert, and going and trying to find threats and threat actors inside the network before they're able to actually do anything really problematic. And this basically, I like to think of it as a lot like more of a private eye sort of thing. You've got your policing thing, which is your straight SIEM blue teaming, where something bad happened, you react. But this is more of there's some weird ideas, proper 1920s hard boil sort of thing, some weird stuff going on, damsel in distress if you want sort of situation. And you've got to go out into the seedy underbelly of your own network, your own systems, to figure out, is there something going on? Who's responsible? And what can you do about it? It's a lot of reacting to weird stuff. It's a lot of diving in and finding stuff out about your network and about your systems that you didn't know before. And the aim of the game is to eventually get to the point where you actually know basically what all of the major, strange, unusual, or realistically activities in general that happen across your systems. Because if you know what's going on as a team, then if you see something unusual, you can react to it very quickly. And of course, the very first thing that an attacker is going to do is inherently something unusual. This is one of the bread and butter segments of the active security ethos. So the idea behind active security, just in a nutshell, is sort of instead of just waiting for things to come to you, you build the wall, you build the moat, you wait for the bad guys to come to the castle. Instead, you go out a bit and you start learning about your opponents and aim to engage with your opponents. There's a whole bunch of stuff about creating honeypots and deception techniques, but basically tricking them to doing stuff. We're not going to go into that here. We're going to go into the other side of it, which is threat hunting, basically going out and figuring out what they're doing on your network. And in the general idea of active security, you don't want to go out and punch your enemy. That's illegal. Like, the only people allowed to do that are essentially the federal government and the military. But if they're on your network, if they're in your property, you can do what you like. So you can really get into, messing with them, figuring out what they're doing, watching them, tricking them into doing stuff more, and then gathering that information and using it to stop them from doing something else. So we can sort of think of this as like a flip side to red teaming, not pen testing. Pen testing is very specific. If you are a pen tester, you will know that generally speaking, you're given a scope and you do very, very specific, we're trying to find vulnerabilities in this. You don't generally then decide to go and target the company's other services and try and see what information you can get out of them. That's what red teaming is. Red teaming is more, hey, break into my company and see what you can get. Use any tactics you can. And the idea behind the red team is that they want to be as quiet as possible to get as much access as possible, emulating an actual attack. And this is the flip side of that, where we're basically going to as many lengths as we can to identify attackers somewhere in the network based on just stuff that we see. So why are we doing this? Like, why on earth would we do this? This sounds like a bit of work to do, right? And the answer is that detection machines, no matter how complex, no matter how sophisticated, will miss stuff, right? They won't be able to categorize things in ways that are, hey, a bad guy is here. And the reason for that is that most simple detection mechanisms just use, string matching at the end of the day. They're looking for a specific set of stuff. And of course, if that's not been seen before, if the attacker does something like a living off the land attack or has built their own malware, or they're using, heaven forbid, your own tools against you, you're not going to pick that up. Now, one of the solutions that's bandied about and has been for quite a few years is using AI. And while AI is incredibly good at telling the difference between categories of things and telling when something's changed, it's really, really, really bad at having any sort of nuance as to what that actually means. So, you can do what we've got in a little image here. It knows that there's a difference between the first picture and the second, but it's kind of gone, oh, well, it's got iPod on it, so it must be an iPod, right? So, if you've got security stuff where you've got information coming in, it'll know that something's changed. It'll know that, this user's doing this thing, but it might not have any idea of the nuance of, hey, in that context, this thing is bad. So, they are very, very good at categorizing stuff, but they're not very, very good at identifying the actual nuance. And unfortunately, security is a very highly nuanced field. It's like, why do we allow Bob to have these permissions on this machine and not that machine? Well, we have semantic reasons behind that. He works in this particular department and not that particular department. So he shouldn't be doing these actions because of that. And those kinds of nuances are obviously lost in a machine that has no nuance. So we can't really rely on AI to do all of our security all the time. So necessarily, it's going to miss stuff. And that's where threat hunting comes in, because what we're going to do is we're going to use the single best detection system ever made, which is currently sitting inside your head, to actually detect the weird stuff. We're going to use the incredible pattern matching capabilities that evolution has given us to actually go and find some weird patterns, identify what it looks like, and use your knowledge of how your systems work against your attackers. So, why do we want to do this? Well, attackers are rather smart. Generally, they know what it is you do for a living, and sometimes they are also blue teamers, or were at some point. You don't know, maybe they've had a particularly bad time because of the COVID pandemic, and now they've switched to the bad guy team because it's the best way to make money. It works, right? If you know how to break, if you know how systems are secured, you can break into them. It's the exact same thing behind pen testing, except now you're doing it for real. We're not really talking about here script kiddies, sort of the low level, guys that just grab an exploit off the internet and then just start using it, just sending it against every machine they can. Those are generally defeated by things like, endpoint security or your firewalls, right? Because that's really, really obvious, because they're not doing anything creative. They're not doing anything new. They don't really understand what security tools they're up against. And generally speaking, they'll be fairly low threat. What you actually are looking for, and what you probably would be looking into threat hunting to do, is to actually look for those sorts of really advanced actors or smarter actors, the exact kind we're talking about here. Those are the guys that are going to ransomware your computer, not some 12-year-old who's copying stuff off the internet, right? You're going to get hit badly by the guys you want to be using threat hunting for. And these guys, of course, knowing what sort of tools you're using and knowing that you will have tools, even if they don't know the specific ones, will know that they need to be specifically stealthy and try not to bring in tools that are easily detectable and try not to perform actions that are easily detectable to get as far into your network as possible. So those are the sorts of targets we're using threat hunting for. Those are the sorts of people we need to use threat hunting for. So, okay, we know why we're doing it. We're hunting the people that are actually smart and are, on the other side of the desk, so to speak. How do we do this? Well, the very first step you'll want to have is a good passive defense system. Now, you don't have to have an actual passive defense system if you're just playing around at home. I mean, I've got, Windows Defender, for example, but you do need to have the sort of centralized data logging that something like that would bring. So having a good passive defense system is really handy, because it means that all the groundwork's done for you. Generally speaking, you want to have a centralized logging system, say an Elasticsearch that you chuck all of your data into if you're doing this at home. Now, active techniques are really, really powerful in what you can get out of them because, again, you're using the knowledge inside your own head. You're using your ability to detect patterns yourself. But those require the data that actually have the patterns in them. So having more data and good data is very, very important. So what you'll want to do is you want to get that data from somewhere. Generally, what you'll want is, if you can get it, discrete actions by different users and different accounts on specific systems. So one of my favorite examples is the Office 365 logs. If you've ever had the chance to peek into Office 365's logging solution, they log every action the user takes with regards to files, emails, logins, etc. And that's a really, really great set of actions because they allow you to really get a grasp on the behavior of that user. So you can basically walk back through them and go, well, I saw this weird thing. Why are they doing these steps? Like, why is this happening? This doesn't make any sense. So once you've got your data, what else do you really need? Well, the very next thing you'll want to have is a good understanding of what actually your systems do. Now, if you have no idea, then that's generally your first real investigation, is to investigate, why does your system make X sort of log? Well, once you figure that out, now you know a little bit more about what kind of logs it generates. My favorite way of approaching this is if you've never done it before and you're sitting in front of a computer, crack open your task manager and have a look and see what kind of processes are running. And if you've never done this before, after this webinar, crack it open, go through those processes and try and figure out what they actually do, right? If you have a fairly good idea on what everything's got, what all these things are doing, great. Next step is to move into your logs and go, okay, what happens on my computer on a regular basis, right? Now, you don't have to get that specific with more, overarching sort of systems, but that's the sort of knowledge we're looking for. You're training your brain on the patterns inside, say, a scene. If you're sitting in front of a scene right now or a SOC, that kind of pattern, if you've been working on one for some time, you'll know what I mean, because you'll go, I see a set of logs and go, yeah, it's just that thing that happens, right? That kind of knowledge is very important for this, because that's the sort of pattern matching knowledge that you have that the computer doesn't, right? Especially if it's something where you've built a rule to hide something, or it's too complex for a rule to hide something, but it is something, it's a specific kind of action. That's the sort of thing that you can't really get an AI to do properly, but you're really, really good at. So if you're starting at home, start with just what your computers are doing, both in logs and, again, grab your task manager. It's pretty fun. But once you get that sort of understanding, or you have that sort of understanding from working just in front of a SIEM or SOC, you can basically use that as your fundamental bit of knowledge on your familiarity with your systems. If you see something odd, your intuition is probably correct. It's probably something that needs an investigation. And that kind of intuition is essentially impossible to automate, which means if you're a manager that manages a threat hunting team, the longer your staff that are threat hunters are working at your organization on your specific systems, the better they're going to get. So losing them, not exactly great. Also, if you're looking into getting into threat hunting, just be aware that the longer you're doing it for, the more valuable your brain is to your organization. So it's pretty neat. It's interesting. It also means that, jumping between different things can be quite tricky. I mean, obviously you've got some innate knowledge from the previous operations, but it's always best to get familiar with the specific systems that you're working with. And the last thing you'll want, and this is very, very important for threat hunting in general, is threat intelligence. Threat intelligence forms the other half of this, hunting loop. And if you don't have any, you're going to have a very bad time, because you won't know what other people know, right? You'll go, okay, my computer is connecting to this IP address. What is that IP address? Is it something I should be worried about? Now, you obviously would then have to perform an investigation with information that you don't have to figure out if that is. But conveniently, we have a lot of organizations that are doing that already, and very often they are willing to sell this intelligence as a feed to you. So if you've got one of those plugged into your SIEM, you've got a bunch of them plugged into your SIEM or SOC, that's really handy to work with. But if you don't, and you're at home just trying this out, there's this really, really great social network that uses this sort of approach called OTX by AT&T Cybersecurity and Alien Vault. And that is basically, yeah, just a social network of threat intelligence. So you can pop on there and you can actually subscribe to different organizations and different, cybersecurity researchers that are interesting. Or, and this is extremely useful, if you're in a specific field or specific business type like banking or mining or whatever, finding people inside the network that are in that field or that business, like that kind of business, because if you have the same business processes as another company, you're probably vulnerable to the same kind of procedural attacks, the same kind of, vulnerabilities in how your staff or the people that work in your company will operate. So, you're going to have familiar kinds of vulnerabilities just in personnel and in software and like procedure, which means that attacks that are effective against another company in your sort of area may be effective against you. So if you can get that kind of intelligence on what those attacks are, how they worked, what kind of things they were looking into, that sort of thing, you can then go, okay, I know what I'm looking for when they come to me. So this gives you a lot of context where known bad guys are, what they're doing in your sector, if you will. And then you can use that to inform your investigations. You'll know more than you possibly could yourself. So awesome. Process on threat hunting. How do we actually do this? Well, the first thing is you need to find a lead. What is a lead? We'll get to that in a sec, but generally it's something that makes you want to go and investigate. Then you go and investigate to figure out what's causing it. And once you're done there, you resolve it or remediate it. Sometimes this is a 4-step process because it's a remediation step is all on its own. But essentially, you find something you want to investigate because it seems strange, odd, or potentially problematic. You figure out if it is strange, odd, or potentially problematic, and then you do something to either fix or inform the rest of your team as to what your investigation was. And that's a really, really simple process. In essence, in what actually happens, it can be very complex. So simple, but it's one of those easy to pick up, hard to master sort of approaches. So what kinds of things do we have? Well, the first kind of hunt is a structured hunt. This is essentially when, say, your SIEM or SOC comes up with an alert or some threat intelligence comes in, says that, something may be untoward. So what you want to do is you then want to look into the actions matching that known threat intelligence or that specific action. So you want to kind of have a look at, okay, well, I think that this alert relates to this kind of threat intelligence. Say it's like a campaign. For example, Log4Shell. You get an alert that tells you Log4Shell has hit one of your systems. You go, okay, what kind of steps does an attacker take once that happens? Well, that's usually an early, attack, like it's on the border, if it's in the DMZ of your network. That's probably their first point of call into your network. So you can sort of say that's the initial entry point if you're talking about the attack framework. If it's internal to your systems, then that could be problematic. It means that they're using it to laterally move, at which point you go, okay, well, that's a bit further on. That's access, but it's more lateral movement rather than initial. And then, you kind of work back from there and apply that attack framework to what's going on. You work to actually build out the kill chain and figure out what they've been doing inside your network. And you gather that information on what's been going on. Once you've identified a threat, you go, okay, this is what's happened. This is why it's happened. This is what we're going to do about it. This is where they came from, what sort of things they're looking for, etc. And once you've got all that information, you can gather intelligence on what they're doing, which, of course, gathering all this intelligence in the first place is really, really useful, not just for yourself, but for sharing it with other organizations. Sharing is caring in the threat hunting circle because, if we all work together to share what the bad guys are up to, it is infinitely harder for them to surprise all of us. They'll get one of us and then everyone else will know what they're doing, meaning their campaigns become exponentially harder the more effective we are at this. So then, of course, you'll want to eliminate the threat. Very often the idea is kick them out now and then figure it out later. With active security, one of the things you'll want to do is engage with them to try and extract as much information as possible. So if we just dive back over into that deception sort of play, getting a honeypot, getting them engaged, figuring out what they're going for and trying to deviate them away from where they're going to cause damage and towards somewhere where you can basically watch them That will give you a ton of information on what tools they have, what their capabilities are, what they're actually looking for, why they're looking for it. Are they looking for financial gain? Are they looking to set up an attack further on? Are they trying to get into your emails? Are they trying to get into your file servers? What are they doing, right? But yeah, once you've got that information, at whichever point, you can eliminate them, knock them out, make sure they can't get back in, and then you can restructure your defense to basically stop that from happening again. Again, restructuring rules, setting up different firewall settings. If you've got a machine that they've got into, for example, on your DMZ, do you really need that machine accessible to the internet? That sort of thing. Second type of hunt is the much more fun one, the unstructured hunt. A lead comes from a hypothesis. What's a hypothesis? Well, we'll get to it later, but essentially it is you have an idea that something is happening and you want to try and prove that, in fact, this is happening, or alternatively disprove that it is happening, right? It's a very sort of semi-scientific approach to things where you're kind of going, okay, I think this might be happening. How do I prove it or disprove it? And if you can prove it, well, now you know something is happening. And if you can disprove it, it's not happening. So for example, you have a hypothesis that, hey, I think someone has used Log4Shell and now they're communicating out to the internet. Okay, well, first check is that machine vulnerable to Log4Shell? If it's not, well, then that hypothesis is incorrect. But if it is, then you can step onto, okay, can I look into the logs of the application and see if it's been affected by Log4Shell, right? So it's a very like scientific process. You go, you test your hypothesis, you make a new hypothesis, you test your hypothesis, and so on and so forth. And this will allow you to build up to determining that a threat exists. And how that really looks like in terms of investigation, it's identifying patterns of unusual behavior that support the hypothesis, as well as things that are facts that disprove hypotheses, and identifying what is actually causing that behavior and what is behind it. Theoretically, it could be anything, an attacker, it could be misconfiguration, it could be a user that's not doing the right thing and they need to be retrained, it could really be anything. But if you've got something that looks potentially malicious and you investigate to figure out what's causing it, you will learn something that will be useful in terms of your own internal intelligence about your systems inside your organization, as well as give you actions that you can take to make your systems more secure. So it's like almost a proactive approach to determining what to do next inside your environment for security purposes. So yeah, that's essentially what a remediation ends up looking like. Is once you find what's causing the thing, what can we do about it, right? Is this something that we now have to move to being like a structured hunt? Like we found a threat actor, let's go and figure out what they're up to. Is this something where we have to retrain someone? It depends on what you end up finding, right? And this is all started by any sort of tool that will give you information. So just stuff you see and go, this is off in your CMOR SOC, or tools that provide leads, or intelligence that you look at and you go, hang on, I'm pretty sure I saw something like that last week, that sort of thing. And the last one is the situational hunt, where a situation occurs and you make a hunt out of that. For example, someone announces that Log4Shell is a thing, at which point you go, oh no, do we have any internet-facing devices that are vulnerable to Log4Shell? Because if they are, they've probably already been hit. So at that point, you get a new intelligence reveals there's a new threat actor campaign or a new exploit available. So you go, okay, let's hunt in our environment and see if we are vulnerable to that. And if we are, let's see, okay, have we been impacted? What does that result in? And so this mostly looks like threat hunt type 1, the structured hunt, with the additional thing that if you've got an exploit and a patch is available, once you've identified that a thing is vulnerable, if it's not been hit, maybe you want to patch it. So yeah, hypotheses. We sort of went into this a little bit before, but this is like you found something weird, again, very much driven by your insight and what you are used to on your CMOR SOC. If you see something strange, maybe it's something worth investigating, right? Something looks off, something may be a threat, something is sending out events that you're not really sure about. It might just be something you don't know about on your network. Maybe someone's doing some new behavior, maybe something's just been installed, but it could be something malicious. And so again, knowing what it is super important, and performing these kinds of proactive sort of investigations, free-form investigations to identify what's causing things in your network, very, very important for improving network security. Oh, my screen is just broken. Oh, there we go. Cool. And one of the reasons we do this is because of Lecard's exchange principle, which is like a very old school forensics investigation rule. And the idea is that every contact leaves a trace. Now, in the physical world, this has to do with literal contact between two items. Like if they step on dirt, dirt will be on their shoe, and the dirt will now have a footprint in it. And you can use that to identify that a person has probably been at a place. But in cybersecurity, in the cyber realm, every action leaves a log or leaves some sort of trace in your network, right? Every single action. So an attacker doing anything malicious will leave evidence of that malicious act. And if you have tools, passive tools that detect stuff, passive tools that return logs to a logging system, you can find those traces in real time. And that's essentially what we're doing here. We're doing real-time forensics, where we just need to know how to listen, how to look for those traces, because attackers, regardless of how quiet and regardless of how clever they are, they will leave some kind of trace. This is how you things like people like FireEye managed to find that SolarWinds was happening, the whole SolarWinds hack was happening, simply because they went, this is odd, and then they went back and followed those traces. So trace evidence will always lead you to the actor or the attack if it is occurring in your network, and every single log you get, regardless of how useless, does tell a story. So being aware of what stories each log tells is kind of the key element in terms of your human understanding and human intuition into this sort of thing. So how do you get started? Well, as I said before, the easiest way to start is to open Task Manager and start figuring out what it is your computer actually does. So becoming familiar with your environment that you're doing threat hunting on is key. And yeah, if you're at work spending all your day staring at a sock or seam, you probably already have this inherent knowledge. You can just get started. You can just play around in your spare time doing investigations into that log data. So free tools that we have access to, and these ones are my personal favorites for playing around with when I don't have anything else available. Kibana and Grafana are super useful. Why? Because we detect patterns really, really well in things like sensory data, right? So what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste. Unfortunately, computers aren't particularly good at the smell or taste or feel bit. They can do hearing, I guess, if you're really good at that, but that's really tricky to set up. But for visual stuff, we're really, really good at creating visual stimuli out of graphs, out of lines, out of all sorts of stuff on computers. And Kibana and Grafana allow you to import tons and tons of logs. There are scripts readily available on the internet that can pull in syslogs from Linux, Windows event logs from Windows. You can send syslogs directly to Logstash applications. There's documentation on the internet, very easy to set up. So you can plug basically everything you've got into one of these things, and you can use it to freeform create graphs and visual representations of what's going on that will allow you to visually see the patterns you're looking for. And strange stuff in those visual patterns are exactly the sort of thing that you want to be looking into. If you see a repeating pattern, go and investigate it. If you see something change that you've never seen before, go and investigate it. That sort of thing is really, really powerful in terms of how we interact with data. So getting more visibility beyond your computer, if you're at home, you've probably got a firewall. It's probably a crappy switch, but you can usually pull the system logs off of it if you can get a Telnet or SSH connection to it. You can, if you don't have that, set up yourself with a TCP dump or a snort and get information directly from your network. If you wait maybe 3 to 6 months, we've got a at-home Firebug Pro that's in the very, very close to being done in the pipeline. And of course, if you're at a business, Firebug Enterprise is available right now and can provide this kind of network level lead as its base functionality. It's got a whole bunch of other stuff that can assist with beginning these sorts of active threat hunts as well. But if you're not, then that's okay. Just hang tight. And if you're lucky enough to be working on a SOC team at work and you have spare time to just do some investigations, yeah, you have everything there, hopefully, already. Then you don't have to add anything more to it. So how do you get good at this, right? That's the real question. How do you actually get really, really good at this? And the answer is do it a lot and keep up to date with cyber threats as they evolve, right? OTX is really, really handy for this because it will just give you these real-time feeds as people find them, and perform threat hunts based on those threats. Go see if your systems are vulnerable. Go see if your organization is vulnerable, because If you're just doing this for fun and you find something, congratulations, you have just made value. You've added value simply by doing a threat hunt, even though technically you're just, an engineer or you're just monitoring. And if you're doing it at home and you find something, that's really cool. And also you've stopped someone from using your router as, some kind of, proxy, if it's like one of those Russian Trojans in your router. The other thing that's really useful is maintaining a wiki or journal or knowledge base of some description of what you find. If you're in a corporate environment, this is really, really useful because it lets other people know the stuff that's in your head. The more descriptive you are, the better. And if you're doing it at home, it's just useful to have, because if you see something and you go, oh, I remember seeing that on my home network 6 months ago, you can crack into your knowledge base, wiki, journal, whatever, and go, this is what I found. Is this similar? So that kind of maintaining that sort of knowledge via whatever means is really, really useful for these kinds of hunts. And the last thing you definitely want to do is share with others. We are all the good guys here. This is the apex of blue teaming. We are fighting the bad guys actively now. We're going out there and figuring out what they're doing. We're trying to engage with them. We're learning about it. We need to work together. There's a big problem in industry where we just do not talk about at like a high level all of the things that we're doing, right? And fair enough, there are operational reasons for it. But the intelligence, the actual stuff, the learnings on why they got in, how they did the stuff they did, what they were looking for, maybe not the specific files, yeah, okay, but they were looking for access to accounts, right? They were looking for access to files of a specific type, right? That sort of information is extremely helpful, not just to other members of your team, but other members of other security teams, maybe in your business's sort of sector, maybe across the globe, right? If it's a very, very broad kind of attack. So we need to get really, really good at having communities that share this sort of information. And they are starting up. And you probably have access, you probably have contacts with a lot of people in a lot of different security organizations. But things like OTX are really, really handy at giving a very, very public, very, very broad space to share this information. So yeah, when you find stuff, share it, right? Do you not like anonymize it? Sure. But share that information, because that will make life so much better for all of us. And if we all get very good at this, it will be incredibly difficult for attackers to take advantage of us. Cybersecurity is an intelligence warfare game. Everything is based on intelligence information, right? Just pure information. If you have more information than your opponent, you win, right? And the attacker is always at a disadvantage. They have to learn about your network. They have to learn about what you know. If you know about what they're doing, you're way ahead of them. So yeah, sharing is caring. Yeah, threat hunting is awesome. Do it a lot. Have fun with it. Just get out there and find out what your computers are up to. And that's pretty much it. Now taking questions, I think.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, so now is a great opportunity for you guys to ask any questions that you might have. You can chuck them in the chat, or raise your hand as well. So if you want to take some time to do that. In the meantime, I will hand over to Steve Woods. I think he had a question, directly to Stefan. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Maddie. Great presentation, Stefan. Really enjoyed it. I wonder if you've got a story about some of your favourite threat discoveries. Have you found any?
Geez. So yeah, I mean, I think some of our fun ones have been, one of the things that I find a lot of organizations have, and I'm sure a lot of people out there will relate to this, is just no one has any idea what's on their network, right? You didn't create the network. Your co-workers didn't create the network. It's very much like that we didn't start the fire sort of thing. It was always burning. So, yeah, no one really knows what's on their network. So a lot of what we've found has been, did you know this was happening? No, everyone scrambles to investigate to figure out what it is. Examples, we find using Firebug, we find in a POV trial, it was great fun. We find that there's a 2 a.m. This large file transfer occurs inside the core network, like right at the middle of the AD cluster, and we're kind of going, that's a bit odd. We've never seen that before. I mean, you know, not in this network, but we haven't been there too often. So hopefully the security and IT team will be able to give us a bit more information. So we go, hi guys, last night we saw at 2 a.m. this big file transfer from core network machine 1 to, you know, slightly further out machine 2. Do you guys know who could have done that or what could have done that? We don't know about any internal processes that could have been doing that, but, you know, can you investigate? And they turned around and went, we have no idea. We don't even know why something would be moving from there to there. And they go on and have an investigate, and they find out that turns out there's a sysadmin who logged in at 2 a.m. and was moving a disk image around because he didn't do that at work during the day. So, you know, you've got all of the, you know, classical sort of things of an actual threat happening. You've got an authenticated user with high privileges moving something around in the dead of night. You know, that sounds like a potential threat. So, of course, because the team didn't know that there were disk images stored on this machine or that there was any reason to move them, obviously, you know, you wouldn't see this during the day when everyone's doing the normal operational work. You know, they were freaked out, ended up contacting the sysadmin and going, we've been investigating your account and we're pretty sure this has happened. And the sysadmin goes, oh yeah, no, I just, you know, kind of was up at 2 a.m. and thought I'd just do it. So, you know, my favorite things about threat hunts are not necessarily when you find a threat. Yeah, there's a couple of those. We've found things like, you know, backdoor agents sitting on machines in VPNs, because you go, that's a really weird sort of connection to a known threat actor in threat intelligence. Maybe you guys should go have a look. But the real fun ones are when you go, what is this? And everyone goes, we have no idea what's on our network. We have no idea what happens. We can't answer this question. Let's go find out. So being the guy that actually has that information, being the threat hunter and going, oh yeah, that's probably this guy moving disk images because they're on that machine. It's a weird time for him to be doing it, but instead of running around and going, we need to do all these investigations, you can really accurately go, that's probably the problem. Let's go have a look. But yeah, so, you know, threat hunts are great fun when you end up with weird sort of scenarios coming out of them.
It's a great story, and it's more of a perhaps a health issue or a HR issue. So there might be a threat, but it's not a cyber threat.
Yeah, and this is one of the most curious things about threat hunts. It's like, yeah, the best thing that you can get out of it is if it's an actual real threat, because then you've proved that the threat hunt hunts threats. Great, but there is so little information that the rest of the organization should have access to that they just don't. So being able to provide that information at a high level to just all parts of the business not only helps with whatever they're doing, but it also helps with securing in general, because you can go, these behaviors are against policy. Why are people doing them?
Cool. Alrighty. Well, does anyone else have any other questions? We have a couple minutes if you do want to ask. If not, no worries. I do just want to say thank you again for coming and listening to Stefan, and I hope that you learned something or have taken something out of today's webinar. Keep an eye out on our hyprfire page. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more. Oh, I think Cecily. Oh, sorry, Cecily. I think you might have a question.
No, I just wanted to say thank you, and that I really appreciate the Lunch and Learn series, and it was great to hear Stefan present. It was a wonderful interlude to my day and really engaging, and I look forward to the next one. So thank you to the hyprfire team for putting it together.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Just quickly, should we get Stefan to run through an example of a bad actor?
Sure, I could do that.
Yeah, just quickly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's talk. All right. So we're sitting there with Firebug. We get an alert that there's an bizarre, strange HTTPS communication from a sensitive server network out to a machine in Kazakhstan. Now, Firebug knows this is a problem because Kazakhstan is somewhere that this particular segment of the network, this particular ring fence, doesn't actually talk to very often. So it goes, hey, this has weird properties just at a statistical level. It doesn't look like a HTTPS session. It might be, but it'll be really weird. But it's going to a really weird place. maybe we should go and investigate. So the very first step there is, being my favorite thing to play around with, is just to chill, go over to OTX and type in the IP address. And that comes back with, oh yeah, no, that's a known C2 actor for a Bitcoin mining botnet. You don't like that guy. You shouldn't be talking to that guy. At which point you can then, we then turn around and go to the organization and say, yeah, so during this particular, reporting cycle, we've noticed that there's a machine that's talking to a known C2 server over what may be a HTTPS tunnel. You might want to go and investigate. Now, the nice thing about Firebug is it's got like really, really tight timestamps. So instead of just being told, go into that machine's logs and have a look. And if you've been inside logs, there's millions of them and they're really, really hard to dig through. Of course, Firebug's like, it's between this microsecond and this microsecond. So there's like 50 logs in there. And of course, at that point, they go and have a look inside and they go, yeah, well, the CPU alarm's going off. It's communicating out there. And if we wander back through the logs, we'll find they found, hey, it's broken in, it's, installed this Trojan. Looks like it's mining Bitcoin. So again, being a Linux Bitcoin miner, it's like, okay, cool, you just remove it. You, patch the machine, you make sure that the actual application exploit they used to get in is patched. But again, the threat hunt itself is the machine hasn't been hit in any way that, because it's a Linux machine, it doesn't have an endpoint system on it. The firewall's not telling anything because you've got a allow all out policy. And so what's happened is some other machine somewhere else that's, in Azure or something has come along and said, hey, you need to talk to this guy in Kazakhstan, which means nothing suspicious comes in through the in part of the firewall. It's just going out. But of course, because it's that all out policy, it's not going to check it. So Firebug, which is just looking at the entire network from this sort of neutral perspective, goes, hang on, I know that that's allowed by the firewall, but it's really weird and probably needs to be investigated. And as essentially that's a lead that would go into, a sort of unstructured hunt, right? The unstructured hunt being, well, why is this weird? And then, of course, as soon as you find that there's a threat actor involved, it becomes structured. Okay, there's a Bitcoin mining threat actor. What sort of things do they do? Well, they put Bitcoin mining tools on Linux machines. Well, there's a Linux machine talking to a Bitcoin mining machine. Maybe we should go on a Linux machine and see if there's a Bitcoin miner. Sure enough. So yeah, for hypotheses, ways of proving or disproving hypotheses, doing your investigation, proving or disproving, building up a theory, and then finding the actual threat. Threat hunt.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for going through that for us. I think that is all the questions that we had at this time. So again, thank you for attending and keep an eye out on our hyprfire pages. Yeah, like Cicely said, it is going to be an ongoing webinar sort of series. So thank you so much. And we will see you next time. Let us know if you have any ideas what topic we should cover next. Cool. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, team hyprfire. Well done. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.